Steve Bannon with me this morning from the border in Arizona. And Steve, we're talking about trade. The president has to get USMCA done. The president has to do other trade deals unilaterally with Europe, maybe the UK, as they're trying to leave the EU. What's your take on whether or not Nancy Pelosi brings USMCA to the floor? And will the president be successful in these other trade deals with European nations?
I think she has to. Look, they gave Lighthizer, Ambassador Lighthizer, all their markup and their changes a month ago. Remember, Mexico's already approved this. Canada's waiting to approve this. President Trump, I think, has cut a good deal here. He accommodated both of these nations, particularly got this content situation in Mexico, so China can't game the system and send their products through Mexico. It's a deal that works for people, works for the farmers. I don't know how Nancy Pelosi holds this back, anything but partisan politics. What President Trump's trying to do on trade is reformat what the elites in this country and the corporatists in this country have basically frittered away to deindustrialize our country, Maria, and also to affect and lower the wages of American workers.
Yeah.
His deals with Korea, the deal they're talking about with Japan, the new NAFTA deal, which I think will be approved, will be a #1 priority for the Trump administration, Lighthizer, Navarro, when people come back, and also EU. And this gets back to the centerpiece, the entire geostrategic realignment around China, because China is the one that makes a difference. And the Europeans and the Japanese, Canadians and Mexicans, all the industrial democracies understand that President Trump is steadfast in really, I think, restructuring this state totalitarian capitalism of China.
We're going to talk more about that with Steve Moore, a former senior economic advisor to the president. He's coming up later on in the show. But you do have an interesting scenario going on when you look at the leadership changes in Italy, perhaps, in Brazil with Bolsonaro. You've got Brexit on the horizon with Boris Johnson. Does the president have allies here to go against China with him?
Not just allies. He's really started, I think, a world revolution in this regard. This populist-nationalist movement of standing up for the little guy.
Yeah.
You know, Brexit in 2016 were inextricably linked, but now, because of the European parliamentary elections and what happened, Salvini's calling for elections in Italy, and he will be prime minister even without a coalition. If he runs and this thing takes place in September, October, he could get over 40% of the vote. You've seen Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage in the United Kingdom, and you've seen really the return and rise of Marine Le Pen in France, and of course Bolsonaro, who ran on the thing, we don't want China in here buying Brazil, and is a very close ally of President Trump. You're seeing the Trump message, this Trump thing of protecting the little guy, protecting your workers, of having the rule of law when it comes to immigration, is starting to actually go throughout the world. The Salvini situation is going to be very, very important in the fall to see what happens there, because he's a very close ally of President Trump, and you're going to see those guys, I think, back off of this one belt, one road with China.
Well, all the while, you've got protesters in Hong Kong holding the American flag, which I thought was incredible. I got to switch topics and ask you about all this pushback. All of this happening while the president is getting slammed by the left. He tried to have a fundraiser this weekend. He did have two actually raised a lot of money, and yet the organizer, Stephen Ross, got slammed for supporting the president. What's your take on all this pushback? You've got pushback from even Jerry Nadler, who's trying to, work up an impeachment inquiry. Well, I mean, Nadler says, this goes to out of touch the Democrats are. He actually announced on Friday, I think on CNN, he's got he calls it a formal impeachment inquiry actually rolling. This thing with private citizens, Castro, I think, is by far the worst, because the billionaires can kind of take care of themselves, but you're seeing now elected officials, Democrats, that are starting to turn on private citizens that support President Trump. We've never had this in this country. This shows you the stability and order that Donald Trump represents versus the chaos and anarchy of the radical left. I am stunned. I come from a Democratic family. Our family were Democrats, were Kennedy Democrats for years. We changed because of the Vietnam War later, because all of us went into the service. But I got to tell you, the Democratic Party has been so radicalized, and what you're seeing at Castro down in Austin, Texas, is unacceptable. To really weaponize people's donations, private citizens' donations. This is going to get very dangerous. This is going to get very dangerous, Maria, and it's got to be stopped. And somebody in the Democratic Party has got to step up and take leadership. They've got to call these people out, and they have to hold them accountable. If people want to give donations to either the left or the right, it should be their right as an American to do that. That's called free speech. It's political speech, and we shouldn't shut that down. Well, that's how afraid, by the way, they are of Donald Trump. They will go to any mechanism
to defeat his presidency.
Well, it's interesting to hear Universal now scrapping the film The Hunt following the gun violence uproar.